He had always believed that books were more valuable than money, a belief that sounded noble only in stories and absolutely useless inside his family. At the dinner table that night, surrounded by polished marble, expensive lights, and people who measured human worth in bank balances, he felt like a stain on their luxury. His father didn't even look at him directly when he spoke. He simply stirred his drink and said, "So this is what we raised. A grown man playing with chalk and calling it a career." The brothers laughed first, the kind of laugh that was rehearsed through years of arrogance. One of them leaned back and added, "Honestly, even a delivery rider makes more than him. At least packages are useful." Another smirked and called him Professor Broke, like it was a formal title now. Their wives giggled politely, the way people laugh when they want to stay included in the winning side of a conversation. He didn't react immediately. That was always his problem in their eyes. He didn't explode, didn't fight dirty, didn't chase attention. He simply existed with too much patience. His mother finally spoke, twisting the knife gently, as if kindness could disguise cruelty. "We gave you opportunities, not excuses. And you chose school books?" He looked around the table. Everyone was waiting for him to break, to beg, to defend himself loudly so they could enjoy crushing him further. Instead, he slowly placed his fork down and said, almost calmly, "I chose to teach people how to think. I didn't realize that was a crime here." That earned a sharper laugh. Someone muttered something about wasted intelligence. Another said he would end up talking to dusty shelves and ghosts. That was when he made his decision. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just silence that felt heavier than all their insults combined. He stood up, adjusted his simple shirt, and told them he was opening a small neighborhood library. The reaction was instant disbelief, then mockery. One brother actually clapped slowly, sarcastically. "Yes, perfect. Go live your fantasy. Maybe the books will pay your rent with fairy dust." Even then, he didn't lose control. He simply nodded once, as if accepting instructions, and walked out of the room while hearing laughter follow him like a shadow. The house felt louder behind him than in front of him, like success itself had already chosen a side. Outside, the night air was colder than expected. He held a small box of books, a broken espresso machine, and the last piece of dignity he refused to sell. He didn't know it yet, but somewhere between humiliation and quiet determination, something unusual had begun. A future that none of them would ever be prepared for was already taking shape in the silence they had mistaken for defeat. The library started as a joke, even to the people who walked past it. A small, slightly crooked building between two noisy shops, with a hand-painted sign that looked like it had survived 3 different storms and one very angry cat. Inside, it was even worse in the beginning: empty shelves, squeaky floors, and a single desk that he found second-hand. But to him, it felt like building a new universe from dust. The first weeks were painfully quiet. Only a few people came in: an old man who slept in the reading corner, a bored college student pretending to study, and a woman who only came because the Wi-Fi password was easier to steal than her neighbor's. He didn't complain. He taught, recommended books, and sometimes talked to the empty chairs like they were future students who just hadn't arrived yet. Then came the night everything changed. It started with frustration. A group of teenage boys came in laughing loudly, mocking the idea of reading Shakespeare. One of them opened a book upside down and joked that it looked like ancient alien code. Something in him snapped, but not in anger exactly. More like passion finally spilling over the edge. He stepped forward, rolled up his sleeves without thinking, and started explaining Shakespeare like it was a battlefield report. Not soft, not polite, sharp, intense, alive. He called Romeo emotionally unstable, Juliet impulsive, and the entire tragedy a warning about dramatic decision-making at midnight. His voice rose, his hands moved, and for the first time, the library wasn't quiet, it was electric. A young woman sitting near the back had been recording casually, thinking it would be a funny clip for her social media page. She didn't realize she had captured something far more dangerous than comedy. The way he spoke, the intensity in his eyes, the casual frustration mixed with intelligence. It wasn't just teaching anymore. It was performance. Accidental, raw, and strangely magnetic. By morning, the video had exploded online. At first, he didn't understand why people started entering the library holding their phones up like weapons. Then the comments started appearing everywhere. Who is this angry Shakespeare man? Why is he weirdly attractive? I don't understand literature, but I would die for him explaining it. Within days, the library stopped being quiet. Women started coming in pretending they loved classical literature. Some brought wine. For educational purposes. Others asked him to explain poetry while staring at him like they had already forgotten the poem existed. Men began showing up too, pretending to read heavy novels, competing silently, adjusting their posture whenever he walked past. The place transformed into something no one could have predicted. It wasn't just a library anymore. It became an experience. Evening sessions turned into chaotic discussions where literature mixed with laughter, debates, and accidental flirting. People argued over Shakespeare like it was a sports match. Someone once fainted dramatically during a romantic poetry reading, and no one was entirely sure if it was real or part of the trend. He noticed something else too. The library was no longer empty, but it was also no longer simple. It had become alive in a way that felt slightly dangerous. Every interaction carried a strange tension, admiration, curiosity, attraction, and competition all tangled together. And somewhere in that chaos, a new version of him was forming without permission. One that his old family would never recognize. 4 years changed everything, but not in a slow or polite way. It happened like a system overload. The small crooked library no longer existed in any meaningful sense. In its place stood a glowing cultural empire disguised as a reading space. Glass expansions, neon-lit book cafes, rooftop poetry lounges, and wine and literature nights that were booked months in advance. People didn't just come to read anymore, they came to feel something, to escape something, or to pretend they understood something deep while secretly just staring at him. He had become a global figure without ever planning it. Clips of his lectures circulated everywhere. The Angry Shakespeare Breakdown video was now considered a classic internet artifact. Universities referenced it. Influencers copied it. Even people who hated books somehow knew his name. His voice, once dismissed as useless in a rich dining room, was now used in advertisements for literary festivals across continents. But what made the situation worse, or funnier, depending on perspective, was the audience. Women filled his events not just for books, but for the energy. There was something about the way he spoke, sharp but intelligent, intense but not arrogant, that made people lean in closer without realizing it. Men came too, pretending to be intellectual competitors, holding books they clearly had never opened, nodding seriously at sentences they didn't understand. The library had turned into a strange ecosystem of desire, humor, and performance. Someone once described it as a place where literature goes to flirt, and the description stuck. Behind the scenes, he built an empire he never bragged about. Publishing deals, translation rights, streaming adaptations of literary discussions, even a global reading club subscription that people paid for monthly. Yet he still wore rolled-up sleeves like he was just tired of bureaucracy rather than running a cultural phenomenon. And then there was her. The marketing freelancer who had recorded the original viral video. She never really left. At first, she helped him manage the sudden attention. Then she stayed because she understood the chaos better than anyone else. Their conversations were constant, half strategy, half teasing, half something neither of them admitted openly. She would mock his seriousness, and he would mock her obsession with branding emotions. But every joke carried an unspoken familiarity that grew harder to ignore. Meanwhile, far away from this world of books and attention, his old family was collapsing in slow humiliation. The brothers who once laughed at him were now drowning in failed investments, bad business deals, and public embarrassment. Their luxury lifestyle didn't survive reality. Their names, once spoken with pride, were now followed by polite silence or financial rumors. What made it worse was what they kept discovering. Their wives, unknowingly at first, had become loyal members of his global library network. VIP subscriptions, signed poetry collections, private event passes, they were all there. One brother found out during a dinner when his wife casually mentioned attending a wine and literature night, and called it the most emotionally intelligent environment she had ever experienced. She didn't even realize she was insulting her own marriage in the process. The irony was almost too perfect. The man they mocked for choosing books had built the very world they were now emotionally and financially excluded from. And worse, they were starting to realize they could not ignore it anymore. Because when everything else failed, there was only one place left where influence still mattered, and it was the library they once laughed at. They arrived without warning, the way people do when pride finally loses to desperation. The same family that once filled a marble dining hall with laughter at his expense now stood outside a glass-lit library entrance, looking smaller than he remembered. Not physically, but in presence. The confidence was gone, replaced by a carefully rehearsed humility that didn't quite fit them. Inside, the library was alive as always. Soft music during wine night, quiet laughter between shelves, and the faint sound of pages turning like synchronized breathing. Tonight's event was Sensual Poetry and Literature Evening. One of the most popular nights, half intellectual, half chaos, and entirely unpredictable. Guests sat with glasses of wine, pretending not to stare at each other too obviously while discussing lines they barely understood. When his family entered, conversations didn't stop. They simply shifted focus. People recognized them. Not from fame, but from stories. Internet stories. Drama clips. The kind of digital history that refuses to disappear. A few smiles formed, not kind ones. His brothers tried to regain dignity immediately. One adjusted his expensive but outdated suit and asked loudly for him, as if authority still worked here. The other attempted a polite smile that looked more like panic. Their father stood behind them, silent for once, scanning the room like he was trying to understand how a place built from dusty books had become this powerful. He finally appeared from between the shelves, sleeves still rolled, expression calm. There was no shock on his face. Only recognition, like he had expected this moment eventually, just not exactly when. The room didn't go quiet. It watched. One brother began speaking first, rushing words like they were emergency supplies. He talked about misunderstandings, business failures, temporary setbacks. The usual language of people who once believed they were untouchable. But his voice kept breaking under the weight of the place around him, this empire built from everything they had mocked. The other brother tried a different strategy. He laughed awkwardly and said he had always respected education. The lie was so obvious that even the people at nearby tables chuckled into their wine glasses. Then came the most humiliating part without anyone forcing it. Their wives. 2 women stood among the guests, already comfortable, already known. VIP members of the library's exclusive nights. One of them even raised her glass casually when she saw the family, as if acknowledging an awkward coincidence at a social gathering rather than a dramatic collapse of status. Later, she would be heard saying that intelligence was far more attractive than arrogance in bad suits. That single sentence hit harder than any insult ever could. The father finally stepped forward and spoke, his voice quieter than before. Not demanding. Not commanding. Just tired. He admitted mistakes. Not fully, but enough for the room to notice. The kind of apology that arrives after consequences, not before them. There was a pause. The kind that decides endings. He didn't respond with cruelty. That wasn't his style, even now. Instead, he looked at them the way a teacher looks at students who failed an exam they refused to study for. Not anger. Not revenge. Just clarity. He offered them work. Not money. Not status. Simple roles in the library cafe. Beginner positions. Cleaning shelves. Managing entries. Learning from the bottom, the same way every student starts before they understand the value of knowledge. The humiliation wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Around them, the library continued as if nothing dramatic had happened. Poetry readings resumed. Soft laughter returned. Life moved forward. And when his partner finally came beside him later that night, she leaned slightly toward him and whispered with a teasing smile, "So, still think being a teacher doesn't pay?" He looked around at the empire built from words, laughter, chaos, and unintended desire, then answered quietly, "Best lesson I ever taught myself."